Hello and welcome to this session on mouse variables and mouse event handlers. So what we're going to be doing is using those two things to focus on mouse interaction. How can processing know information about my mouse so that I can interact with the sketch that I create? So I can do this in two ways. I can use a system variable. So a system variable is information that processing knows about the mouse, such as its XY position, whether it's currently being pressed, whether it's currently being moved, etc. That is saved, it's already defined within processing. So normally, if we wanted to use a variable, you would have to say int x and give it a value. Processing has already defined it, float mouse x, float mouse y, and then we can just call that variable. The other way that we can do this is using an event handler. An event handler is something that the processing sketch will constantly be looking out for, and as soon as it happens, it will run that function. And that function will run once. And so that might be something like the mouse being pressed or clicked could result in a certain action. So the first that we're going to look at is system variables. These tend to be perhaps slightly easier because they're already set up inside processing. The one we're going to look at is the X and Y position of a mouse so far. So I've just got a basic sketch here and I'm going to draw an ellipse. Now normally I draw an ellipse at position XY. But in this case, rather than use a defined XY position, I want to use a dynamic variable related to the mouse X and Y position. So to do that, we use mouse X and mouse Y. So small m big X, small m big Y, and you see that they change to pink. So when something changes to pink, that means that it's a system variable. If you misspell it, so you put a small y, for example, it's just going to tell you that the variable mouse y does not exist. So having it go pink is your kind of check to know that it's happened. So if I run this, what's happening here? I'm drawing ellipses at my current mouse position. So basically, while my mouse is stationary, it's just drawing ellipses on top of each other. And then it's going to draw them wherever my position is. Now, the key thing here is that I can see all of those lines, right? I can see all of the ellipses that I've created. And that is because I've not got a background drawn on top of it. You can start to make this slightly more interesting. So we can set some random fill colours. And now we can see something more fun. Just generating a random colour, fill the ellipse at that mouse position, round again, random colour, fill the ellipse at that mouse position. And so you can kind of draw a line if you just go nice and slow, but what if I actually want to draw a line? So I can close this out for a second. Now, a line takes four parameters. It takes the X and Y position of the start and the X and Y position of the end of the line. So to do this, we're going to manipulate the fact that draw happens in a loop. So basically, I'm going to draw a line that will start at my current mouse X, mouse Y position, but I want it to go to the place that the mouse was the last time that draw happened. So if my mouse cursor is over here, the draw loop happens, this is mouse X, mouse Y. But then I move, and this is mouse X, mouse Y. But because I've only gone round the draw loop once, that previous mouse X and previous mouse Y, draw remembers it, processing remembers it. It remembers the current value and the one just before. So if I have mouse X, I just put a P at the start. So P mouse X, P mouse Y. And that will draw from the current mouse position to the mouse position the previous draw loop. So now we start to get something a bit more like we might have seen of a sketch of a paint program, that sort of thing. we can start to draw. But we're missing something, and that's that normally you kind of have to click on the mouse. So if I click now, I would have to click to move, but of course it's just doing it without any kind of check on whether or not the mouse is clicked. So for that we can use an if statement. So if something is true, then draw the line. And what we're checking is whether the mouse is pressed. So there is a system variable called mouse pressed, and it goes pink. Again, you know what's happened. Now, if you just say if mouse pressed, that means if this is true. I could, if I wanted to, write it like this, equals equals true, but that's just a bit superfluous. I don't need it because mouse pressed is enough in itself. So now if I run that, I can move my mouse around, but only when I press. So now, does it actually draw the line? And then I can let go. So I can start to actually create stuff, which is something that's maybe a bit more interesting than other options. Now, that is a system variable. I can now include event handlers, and the one I'm going to include is mouse clicked. So there are a whole bunch of event handlers that exist: mouse pressed, mouse clicked, mouse moved, mouse's wheel being moved, and these are all in the processing reference library with a definition of what each one is. For mouse clicked, you have to press and release in the same position. And I know it's an event handler because it's gone bold and blue, and it's got these brackets at the end. Once there's brackets at the end, that is the event handler. Now, every time I click the mouse, let's say I just want to draw a background. So that's going to be my clear function. Every time I click the mouse, everything will disappear. And you know what, let's just continue along the random theme that we've got going here of randomness. Random 255. Okay, so now I am drawing with my mouse, and this doesn't activate that event handler because I press and I move and then I release. If I press and release in the same place, that's going to activate that clicked. So now we're going to get random colours of backgrounds. We can draw, click again. We can draw, click again. So this is the difference between my mouse clicked, which happens this one instance on its own, it's defined separately, and using the mouse variables within it. If I want to, I can use system variables within that event handler. So just to make that point, I'm going to draw an ellipse. I've got no real reason to draw the ellipse other than to show you that it's possible. So I can draw, click, and that creates the ellipse. And again, if I click, I will create. So every time I click, all that's happening is I'm creating something at that position, which is quite nice. So that is kind of an example of how you can use mouse system variables, the pink ones, and mouse event handlers, the blue functions with the brackets, in order to start to create some really nice interactive sketches.